Hey guys, welcome into the Spoken Bee, our NHL and Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Holt. I'm joined by Nicholas Goss. And Nick, how fun is this? We've been wanting to do a hockey podcast for quite some time.
It's finally happening. Let's get it started.
Here we are. Okay, let's just dive right into it. With the current state of the Bruins, obviously, we're the New England Sports Network, so we're going to focus on the Bees here. We're a month into the hockey season, and the Bruins sit at 6-5-3. Kind of a mediocre start.
Yeah, not particularly good, but I think you can really attribute a lot to injuries.
Right.
When you lose Bergeron and Backes and Spooner, and now Marchand, that's 4 or 5 of your top guys. That's really tough.
It is tough. I mean, you mentioned it. They're without a lot of their veterans. Brad Marchand out with an upper body injury. He did not travel on the road trip. Ryan Spooner, groin. David KREJCI back. David Backes, colon surgery. It's a big one. So they're just trying to stay afloat, and they're waiting for those veterans to come back. However, the thing that we have to keep in mind is these injuries are something that we might have to get used to, because a lot of these guys that we mentioned, they're over 30 years old. And Marchand, their second leading scorer, he's 29 years old. So they're all getting up there. They're veterans who've been in there for a while. There's a lot of wear and tear that goes on.
There really is, and the Bruins are going to have to rely a lot on their young players. Yeah, Anders Bjork, David PASTRNAK, who we'll talk about later. They really, Jake DeBrusk has come in and scored some goals. They're going to need these guys to really step up because they don't have any other choice. They have injuries to their best players, and winning the Stanley Cup is all about depth. The Bruins have made a lot of draft picks recently, a lot of first-round picks. A lot of those guys, like DeBrusk, have come into the system and made their way to the NHL team, and they're really going to have to respond because without Marchand, and Backes and Spooner, that's a lot of offensive skill that they're missing.
Well, during this period, one of the key stats to keep in mind is the Bruins have yet to win 2 games in a row. So at this point in the season, were you expecting more out of the Bees? I know we couldn't predict these injuries. Yeah,
I was expecting more of them at the beginning of the season. I actually picked them to go to the Stanley Cup final in our preview videos with Andre Kachtorian. A bit of a bold pick, but the injuries have really decimated them, and they haven't won back-to-back games yet. But they're above water. They're not in a catastrophic spot yet. They still have some young players that are really playing well, but I did expect more from them. But when you have injuries, thrown into it, all bets are off.
And should we say that you attribute this point in the season where they are to the injuries?
I would, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
For you, what has been the most positive sign of the season? Because personally, seeing this team play, I'm still very excited about this season, what they can do. I think they're just in a spot right now where they're dealing with some players that are absent, and it's hurting them. Yeah, I
think David PASTRNAK, getting that contract, he has not lost any of that edge that he has. 16 points in 14 games, point per game player, at least the team with 9 goals. He's been fantastic. Marchand, 14 points in 12 games. Bergeron, 10 and 9. Their top players are playing like top players, and that's exactly what you want. So I think those are positives. I like the way DeBrusk is playing. He's come in, showed some speed. McAvoy is moving the puck really well, helping that transition game, adding some points offensively. And even Anton Khudobin has been better as a backup this year than he was last year, and that was a real weakness for them the last few years. So I think those are positives that they can take.
Let's talk about some of those stars, because you mentioned it. The stars are performing like stars. David PASTRNAK showing why that contract was necessary. He's leading the team with 16 points. He has 9 goals and 7 assists. Marchand, unfortunately, he has been missing the past 2 games, soon to be 3 potentially. He's second with 14 points, 8 goals, 6 assists, so you can see how his absence is really hurting the team at this point. Is this on par with the production that you were expecting from these guys, or have they exceeded your expectations so far? I
think it's a little more than I expected. I think PASTRNAK has the skill to be a point-per-game player. He was pretty close last year. Now, I think he's a guy who can develop into a 40-goal scorer, which, quite frankly, the Bruins haven't had in a while. A consistent 40-goal scorer. Marchand, I think, is another guy who can be near point-per-game clip. Bergeron's offensive statistics have tailed down a little bit in recent seasons, so I like where he's at right now. I would say they're slightly above where I thought, but that's when you have injuries like this, your top players are healthy, have to perform. They need PASTRNAK and Marchand to score goals. That's what they're paid to do, and so far they've done that, so that is encouraging.
Are there any unsung heroes at this point, guys that should be getting more credit than they do in the headlines?
For some reason, a lot of the local media here, they love to bash on Zdeno Chara, and I know he's not the Norris Trophy level defenseman he was for about a decade, but I think he's played really well this year. He's close to 40 years old. He's playing a lot of minutes, a lot of time on the penalty kill. The Bruins have one of the best penalty kills in the league. I believe they're 3rd in PK percentage. So I think he's done a really solid job. And let's face it, he's playing with a lot of young defensemen. Charlie McAvoy, Torrey Krug is still young, Brandon Carlo. He's not playing with the most veteran guys, but he's really leading that bunch and doing well for the Bruins. So, I like the way he's playing at his age.
I think these Boston athletes are used to being bashed on by the media, so sorry guys, we apologize on our behalf. So who needs to step it up the most, speaking of bashing on players?
I look at, I need Tuukka Rask to be a little better. I have 903 save percentage. I know the Bruins, they've been one of the best puck possession teams. They're in the top 10 in Corsi at 5-on-5 this season. I think he needs to be a little bit better. 903 save percentage is not good enough for a player who, is making $7 million a year and is one of the best goalies in the league, in my opinion. I've been one of the biggest Rask defenders out there. I think he can play better, and I think with the young defense and all the injuries they have on offense, scoring could go down a tick coming up. So I think he really needs to step up and play a little bit better.
Most recently, the Bruins fell behind by 2 goals in the first period to the Rangers. They ended up losing that game 4-2, which brings us to our next point, the slow starts and the issues with consistency from this team after the Bruins lost to the Rangers. Head coach Bruce Cassidy said, "The most frustrating thing is the start. Again, we put ourselves in a bad spot. And in this league, it's tough to come back. We've got to learn quickly to not put ourselves behind the 8 ball. Teams are too good." PASTRNAK said the same thing. "We have to prepare for the game and be ready as a team from the first face-off." So how do you correct these slow starts? It's a big issue for the team right now.
It really is, and it's like Cassie said, it's hard to come back. It's even harder when you have all these high school players out of the lineup. The Bruins, as constituted with these injuries, are not built to win 5-4, 6-5 games where they're going to come back and score a ton of goals. I think the thing is to have you have to be very well structured defensively. You can't give up, easy, high danger scoring chances. You can't put Rask in a tough spot early. It just deflates the whole team. And when you have a lot of young players, they're not used to that, and get them down a little bit. So I think, playing a well structured defensive game, not taking too many chances offensively, not jumping into plays when it's not there. I think they have to be a little smarter in that to avoid these bad starts. Okay, we mentioned the youth. Is there anything else that's preventing them from winning some of these games where they're in it? They could win. They just can't pull off the W. They're 6th in power play. They're 3rd in PK percentage. Special teams have been fantastic. So I think the injuries are really the main thing. They also won 3-1 on the road. They've been a pretty good road team the last few years. So that's something to watch going forward if that trend continues. But I think the injuries, when you're missing out that many guys, I mean, I know it's an easy excuse, but when you're missing all those good players, it's hard to be consistent. Guys are not in the right spots. They're playing either above what there should be. Third line guys are playing on the second line, and et cetera. I think that's the main thing that's holding them back right now. So I think if they can get healthy, they can really start to make a run. But there's a lot of guys out, so we'll see if that happens. I think if there's one positive that you can take from these slow starts is that these guys are fighting back, and they're staying in the game, and they're showing the strong will that they have in the final 2 periods. I mean, it's just that first period that seems to be the issue. So once they correct that, I think it's a good sign that these guys are staying in there. Very resilient team. Right. We've seen that in the playoffs the last few years. It's very tough to knock the Bruins out of the playoffs, and I think they have that same mentality in the regular season. They're going to fight tooth and nail, and you're going to have to, you might beat them, but you're going to have to play very hard. Well, up next, Boston heads to Toronto and will play the Maple Leafs on Friday night. Then they play the Maple Leafs at home before they go on the road for 4 games, so this is a tough stretch for them coming up. As you mentioned, they're 1-3-1 on the road so far this season, so looking to improve on that. They're playing after the Maple Leafs, the Ducks, Kings, Sharks, and Devils. So what is the key for the Bees in this upcoming stretch of theirs? The good starts is something they have to improve on, but they really need the goaltending. They're playing teams coming up. I talked about Tuukka Rask earlier. They play Anaheim, who can score. The Kings can score. They play the Sharks, New Jersey, Pittsburgh, we know can score, Edmonton, Tampa Bay. They have a brutal November schedule. You hate to say that November's a make or break month, but we've seen time and time again, if you're out of the race by U.S. Thanksgiving, it's hard to get back in the playoff race. This is going to be a very pivotal month. And like I said, they're playing a lot of teams that can score, have a lot of high-end talent. They're going to be facing Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Nikita Kucherov, Steven Stamkos. They have to play well defensively, and Rask has to step up for them to weather this stretch. And Marchand coming back, hey, that wouldn't hurt, right? It wouldn't hurt at all. It wouldn't hurt them. Let's look around the league here. I want you to tell me your early Cup favorite, because we already know you're bold enough to make predictions for the Stanley Cup final at this point. So I want to throw a team name out there, the Tampa Bay Lightning. These guys are 12-2-2. They sit at first place in the Atlantic Division. They're looking solid. A guy named Nikita Kucherov, he scored 50 goals in 50 games. Well, Kenny, he's on pace for it. I don't see why he can't. You know, if you were playing with Steven Stamkos, I think you and I could score a few goals if we played with him. I think, you know, the Lightning 12-2-2 entering Thursday, the best record in the league. Stamkos coming back after he was hurt the last few years really threw a wrench in their plans. When he's back, he's one of the best players in the league. You know, we always say, you know, great goal scorer, scored 50 goals a few times. He's an underrated playmaker. He is really setting up Kucherov for a lot of these goals. And just top to bottom, great coaching with John Cooper, and just filters down after that. Great forward depth. Victor Hedman leads a very good blue line. Vasilevsky has been very good in net. They're just a tremendous team. Stamkos leads the league with 28 points. Kucherov, I believe, is 26, and the next closest guy is 21. So you're going to have to outscore them, and it's very tough. They look like the favorite for me. Kucherov's
had 15 goals in 16 games, so not too bad for him. St. Louis Blues are 12-3-1. What other teams are you liking this early on in the season?
Yeah, I like the Kings, the way they're playing. You know, in the playoff race right now, and near the top of the Pacific Division, and you know they've struggled a little bit the last few years, and they've had some older guys from those cup runs kind of tail off a bit. But I think, you know, John Stevens coming in as a coach has really helped. He's done a great job coming in for Daryl Sutter. Their special teams is better. And they still have a lot of good players. Jonathan Quick has really emerged after some subpar regular seasons. He's playing very well. And Drew Doughty's arguably the best defenseman in the league. So I think they're getting back to what their game was when they won the Cup twice in 4 years recently. And that's puck possession, good goaltending, and, you know, it's worked for them so far.
Lots of goal scoring around the league, which is exciting for fans. Now, our friends at OddsShark, they threw this fact out, which I thought was interesting. We're seeing an average of 6.14 goals per game, which if that number holds up the rest of the season, that will be the most goals per game in the NHL in over a decade. So I think that's only a good sign for hockey fans.
It really is. Last year there weren't a lot of goals scored. The playoffs same way. So I think this is fantastic for hockey. That there's a lot of goals scored. Some purists may not like it, but I think to bring in casual fans, and that's what the NHL needs, this increase in goal scoring is a recipe for success. Gary Bettman must be loving this.
More fans never hurt anyone, right? Let's do a little trade analysis here. Now, a blockbuster three-way deal took place this past weekend. Colorado Avalanche dealt center Matt Duchene. In return, they received a haul of players and a number of draft picks. And the Nashville Predators received Kyle Turris, and the Ottawa Senators got Duchene in that deal. So the trade had been a long time coming from a lot of people. Who won this trade?
I'm going to say the Predators for now, although I think all three of these teams can really win. First, for the Predators, they lost Ryan Johansson, their #1 center, for the Stanley Cup final last year, and that was a huge blow. When you're going up against Crosby and Malkin, you need your top center, so that was a devastating blow for them. Now they get Turris, who can slide behind Johansson as the #2 center. He's very good offensively, and they didn't have to give up anything from their current roster to get him, which I think is really impactful. They still have their first-round pick this year to trade for help later near the deadline, so I really like that move. And they signed him to a fairly friendly $6 million extension, and they could afford to do that because they've signed so many guys to team-friendly contracts previously. So I really like how the Predators made out in this trade.
And now I want to throw something out there. The Bruins are not working with a ton of cap space, but at this point, seeing what they have so far, do they need to make a move?
I think it depends on how Marchand comes back and how he looks like and how this injury unfolds. I think I like the way back his plays, but he's not a devastating blow for me if he's out for the line for a while. Spooner the same way. But they have the ammo to make a trade. They have a lot of young players. As I mentioned, I believe they've made 6 or 7 first-round picks in the last 3 or 4 years. They have a lot of good prospects. They have their own first-round pick. They have the ammo to make a move, and they have a team good enough to make a decent playoff run. I think they need to wait a little longer to see how bad these injuries are. And if they are, then I think they would have to make some sort of move.
Good stuff. Well, if you have any hockey questions for us, feel free to tweet at us at It's Rachel Holt and at Nick Goss NESN. Easy enough. Make sure you keep it on NESN.com. We'll have all your coverage from the Bees on Friday, and we'll be at the game when they come back home on Saturday. So keep it locked in.